Yun and start recording mga kalapid. Welcome sa isa na namang reaction video. Okay, may init pa to. Galing to sa apoy. Okay, so Binara ni Cayetano, itinama ang maling paniniwala ni Risa Hontiveros. So galing to sa kay PH Newsfeed, okay? So iramin muna natin yung video niya para tayo makapag-react. Okay, so dito kasi makikita natin kung gaano ka grandstanding, kiss-ass, at makakaliwa si Risa Hontiveros ayon sa aking opinyon at sa aking pananaw. Okay? So, ang dito issue dito itong natin West Philippine Sea. Kung anong nangyayari, kung bakit nila pinipilit na China lang yung nananakop, yung pala na mas maraming mga base yung ibang bansa tulad ng Vietnam at Malaysia dito na sa ating economic zone, di ba? So, pakinggan natin si Allan Cayetano kung paano niya bengbangin at paano muna, kunwari sasang-ayon si Risa Hontiveros para kunwari nagkakaisa sila at pagkatapos biglang sa dulo maninira. Nakikita niyo yung yung mga ganong mga galawang bulok. Play natin.
Can give a bloody nose to any of its
At saka makikita nyo kung gaano kabastos yung mga tao talaga, no? Hindi pa nire-recognize talaga magsasalita na.
enemies.
Anyone.
That's why magdadalawang isip ka, just like Nick Subiri who has a black belt, magdadalawang isip ka makipagsuntukan. So what I'm saying is the two of them, hindi natin pwedeng ignore. Let's go to the Malaysian held features. No, this is one.
Mr. President, and good
May I just finish the
about Vietnam, good
is that we have to align a policy with
Bastos
strategy that's
number
something
one.
that can actually get done. And when we
Mr.
compare
President.
Mr. President,
Bastos number
finish.
two.
They congratulate us on the award, but it is not their national policy to implement the award.
That is
I
exactly
must-
what I said, Mr.
Bastos
President.
number
Yes, so
three.
Like the
China,
US, China is not a member of the
no,
UNCLOS.
China is a member of UNCLOS.
Pero di tulad ng China, kahit hindi miyembro ng UNCLOS ang US, kinikilala niya yung
No, no.
arbitral award natin.
That's not correct, Mr. President. Hindi yan sa policy namin. But
Mr.
we want,
President,
but we
good
want
Bastos
something. May I
number four.
finish my sentence?
President,
Malaysia and
Bastos
Vietnam.
number five.
Let me address the Senate President because he addressed my comments.
well, I'm trying
So-
to address the good gentleman's many points that are accumulated.
Bastos number
Sorry,
six.
I was just also addressing your points. Actually, hindi pa tapos ipakita yung pictures ng Malaysia. No? But
Magandang kipag-usap kung yung kausap mo ay matino.
Hindi
Sabi ko,
matino yung kausap niya.
Tapos po ng ICJ, sa GA po dito.
let me finish, Mr.
No,
President.
just some correction.
Bastos number
Yes,
seven.
yes,
Bastos number eight.
So, the fact is, for 3 years during the Duterte administration, nagkakawayan yung Coast Guard ng Pilipinas at ng China. The fact is, it's true, we have very good relationship with Vietnam and Malaysia, pero kasama ang China, hindi pwedeng makipag-usap ang Taiwan diretso sa ASEAN. Ang nakikipag-usap ang China sa Declaration of Conduct, yung Section 5 po, kasama ang China doon, hindi lang ang Vietnam at Malaysia. And it is not true that Malaysia and Vietnam does not tell our Navy that they are in Vietnamese or Malaysian waters. Palapitin mo yung mga barko sa mga hawak ng Malaysia at Vietnam, pareho din sa ginagawa ng Pilipinas, pareho din ginagawa ng China. Let me show you a chart, and let the public decide. Now, can you show how many? Please show on the board how many features are controlled by China, by Malaysia and Vietnam
Yun.
inside our exclusive economic zone, please. May I ask permission to the Senate President that we will put it here.
Please proceed.
So, ayan po, no? Let me put it on my phone so that I can also. So, 4 po ang claim ng China na nasa loob ng EEZ natin. Next slide, please. 11 po ang nasa ng Vietnam. So, hindi po totoo na mas grabe po ang isang
China.
country over the other, no? Magulo talaga itong dispute na to, no? Next slide. Malaysia has 5 and Taiwan 1, but binibilang yun under China, no? I'll give you an example. No?
So
Number
parang
14
parehas
is
silang
Swallow Reef.
5-5.
Can you show the
China,
picture of
Malaysia.
Swallow Reef? Okay, yan po ang picture ng Swallow Reef. It is militarized. Dekada na po yan. Pinakita na rin po yan ng mga think tank sa US. Hindi po chismis or hindi po bali-balita lang na bago ngayon na ang mga features ng Malaysia at Vietnam ay militarized. Kausapin niyo po Navy at saka ang ating pong Coast Guard. Lumapit po kayo dyan. Kinausap ko po sila as Secretary of Foreign Affairs. Sasabihan din po sila, you are in Vietnamese waters. You are in Malaysian waters. Diba? So the truth is, the US think tanks ignored putting that front and center because iba po ang interest ng US sa atin. Sa atin po ang interest natin, sovereignty, territory, and sovereign rights. Ang US po, ang kanilang interest po ay yung freedom of navigation.
Oo.
Ang US po ay hindi nakapirma sa UNCLOS. Ang US po, hindi officially tinatanaw yung pong arbitral award natin because hindi sila signatory sa UNCLOS. I've spoken to people in the White House, I've spoken to senators and members of Congress. Bakit po ang US Joint Patrol hindi nila ino-offer near Vietnam and Malaysia? So that's what I'm saying, Mr. President. But before I continue,
Let me just ask Mr. Our distinguished colleague, if you can show that in the map of where the vicinity of that particular island is, so that we can see the comparison on where it is, no, within the,
yes. Well,
the,
Mr. President,
area. Because if it is closer to Malaysia, then I would understand.
no, this is in our EEC, Mr. President.
Yes, correct. But,
So,
it would be nice if somebody could point
Yeah,
out.
I'll show you all the pictures, Mr. President, but at the end of the interpellation, ang proposal ko po kasi ay dapat po ang National Task Force mag-briefing sa atin sa committee because we agree and we are all outraged about the actions of China. But is the UN General Assembly the right forum for us to get justice? I'm not saying it's the wrong forum. What I'm saying is that under our constitution and jurisprudence, the chief architect is the president. It has never been the House or the Senate. So it is the president who will say what's the strategy, where we will go. But Mr. President, with your permission, I'll just show the other pictures. Pakita
In
natin
the
yung
meantime,
ibang pictures.
Mr. President, good
Bastos
gentlemen,
number
while
12,
the gentleman is
14,
pulling up the other pictures,
15,
if I may just make
18.
a few comments on some of the important points he has mentioned. Hindi lang iisang bansa ang may interest sa freedom of navigation. As
Inulit
the
lang po.
President said in his sponsorship speech of this resolution,
Inulit lang po.
napakaraming bansa at napakaraming regional formations all over the world ay may interest sa freedom of
Para lang po makapagsalita, kailangan niya ulitin yung sinasabi ni Peter Cayetano. Pero pagdating sa dulo, iba naman yung gusto niyang paratingin.
navigation. Dahil napakaraming bansa sa buong mundo ay mga coastal nations din. Hindi
Forward
kasama sa
natin,
UNCLOS, yung
inulit lang
isang
po
world
niya.
power, hindi solve ating national wera. So we hope pati sa lingwahe ng resolution,
We'll go to that, Mr. President. Now, may we show the Vietnam. Start tayo dun sa picture, no? Ito Vietnam, ito po ang Quezon Reef. Meron pong ZPU-57-2 anti-aircraft artillery, may open radar, may armed personnel at gun encampment, may air raid shelter, may battle tank with personal manning.
Vietnam
meron
yan,
pong
ah.
dish antenna, meron pong gun emplacement with personal manning ng QJ.
Kita mo tayong Pilipinas, tayo yung kawawa, yung BRP Sierra Madre. Yun lang yung atin. 'Di ba? Eto, kita mo tong mga to sa kanila, may mga may mga military may mga base na. Grabe.
89 12.77mm HMG. Meron pong battle tank with personal manning inside sa kabilang side. Next slide. You have the Vietnam occupied by Lang K. It has a lighthouse, newly constructed temporary shelter a few years ago pa to. Gun emplacement concrete bunker, 2-story rectangular concrete with solar power heater installed on the roof. It has speedboats, trenches, open array radar, battle tank gun shelters. Next slide. Observation tower with solar panels, open array radar, napakalapit sa atin bansa to. Antenna for mobile phones, it has a battle tank, ongoing construction of trenches.
Globe
It has
ba
personal
ata gamit
Ito
yun?
po ay sa Sincoe, East Reef, Vietnam. Next slide. Ito po yung Pugat Island. Sa Pugat Island po may gun shelter, makikita niyo po may quay siya, meaning pwede pong pumasok yung iba't ibang klaseng ships nila. Meron din pong reclamation yan, may helipad, may CPU-57-2 anti-aircraft artillery, may battle tanks, etc. So, just as we go through this, no, it will show
Pilipinas, ano nangyari sa inyo?
Mr. colleague, no, if I may. Nainggit nga ako sa Vietnam eh. Nainggit ako sa kanila. Actually, these military fortifications is not because of us. It's also because of China.
No, that is in
To be
our
honest,
EEZ.
their number one aggressor in that particular
No,
portion
Mr.
is
President,
to-
I take exception to that. You know why?
Okay.
That is in our EEZ. So you cannot say that that's only against China, that's also against us. If our military goes near Kalansiao K now,
Oh.
the Vietnamese tell us that is Vietnamese land. So meaning if we win and suddenly China leads the South China Sea, West Philippine Sea, hindi po tayo ang makakakuha ng alisan ng China. Ang
Then, Mr. President.
May I just finish?
Yes, Mr. President.
Historically kasi, yung pushback ng Vietnam has been very successful when it came to Chinese aggression on the West Philippine Sea. So, as a matter of fact, we had a whole delegation, I'm not sure if you joined us, when we had the delegation of the Vietnamese Parliament and Speaker of the Vietnamese Parliament with us here, the Communist Parliament of Vietnam, with a lengthy discussion upstairs in our ceremonial hall on how they really push back.
Yes.
They really do not allow.
Agree, Mr. President. And I communicated that to the US, that Vietnam can give a bloody nose to any of its enemies.
Anyone.
That's why magdadalawang isip ka, just like Mick Subiri who has a black belt, magdadalawang isip ka makipagsuntukan. But the problem is that the military equipment given to us, walang weaponry. And in the $680 million South China Sea Fund in 2017-2018, it was Vietnam at Malaysia ang malaking nakuha, hindi Pilipinas. So, Mr. President, I'm not saying nakalaban natin ang Vietnam at Malaysia. Ha? Vietnam and Malaysia are allies as of now, but they are also claimants. And what I'm saying is that they have a clear strategy. Improve their economy, bilaterally negotiate with China, and then build their defenses. So what I'm saying is the two of them, hindi natin pwedeng ignore. Let's go to the Malaysian held
Tama.
pictures. No, this is
Mr.
Swallow Reef.
President, and good
May I
gentlemen,
just finish the
Tangina si-
gentlemen, before we move on to
Talaga,
your
Yeah.
photos about Malaysia. Of course, Mr. President, the good gentleman could also sponsor a resolution calling on the DFA to file a case in the Permanent Court of Arbitration against Vietnam. But this resolution is not mutually exclusive to that. Dahil sa dulo po, Mr. President, we stand for Philippine sovereignty.
Yeah, I could, Mr. President, but it would do no good. You know, that's the point. The point of diplomacy, lalo po kung wala pong world power na mag-enforce, is that we have to align a policy with strategy. That's something that can actually get done. And when we
Mr.
compare,
President.
Mr. President, may I finish? If you compare the strategy
Bastos
of
number
President,
20.
of the Aquino administration and the Duterte administration, makikita nyo po, sa Aquino administration, nawalan tayo ng territory, na take over po ang Scarborough. Sa Duterte administration, ni isang square inch po, walang nawala sa atin. In the Aquino administration, and it's not the fault of President Aquino, it was the strategy and the people implementing the strategy. Ang isang strategy po doon, hindi makipag-usap sa China, nakikipag-usap po sa multilateral, hindi po nakapasok ang ating
Sterlianis.
fishermen around Scarborough. During the Duterte administration, nakapasok po tayo doon. Bakit po? Kasi po nag-uusap bilaterally, which is in the arbitration award, meron po, it is in UNCLOS, and it is also in the declaration of yung conduct. Yung binabanggit kanina po ng good Senator Hontiveros, binabanggit niya nag-uusap kasi sa ASEAN. Kasi po may DOC, no? And yung DOC na yon should go to the Code of Conduct, COC. And China is working with ASEAN with that. But ang sabi ng China, huwag tayo mag-multilateral sa iba because the other world powers have other interests. And if you look at
Yes.
Malaysian and Vietnamese strategy,
Totoo.
they are talking with ASEAN and with China. They are not going to the Court of Arbitration, nor are they going to the UN.
Yung mga superpower na bansa na yan, alam mo matagal ko na sinabi sa inyo to. Pagdating dyan sa West Philippines na yan na issue, hindi lang naman yan China. US, merong mga ano yan, may mga intensyon yan, mga superpower. Ano intensyon yan? Manakop din naman, hindi naman tumulong talaga. Diba? Pare-parehas lang yan.
General Assembly. That's what I'm saying. I'm
So
not saying it's the
therefore-
wrong strategy. I'm saying you can look back in history and see the results of the two. And I'm saying that the Senate should tread carefully and get the right information. Kompletuhin kasi kanina lang sinabi ni Senator Hontiveros, hindi naman ganun kasi ang Malaysia at Vietnam. But now with the pictures, makikita nyo. Yung iba sa atin dito hanggang ngayon nagugulat. When I briefed the military, some in the military, especially if they're not in the Navy, hindi nila alam na ganito din ang sitwasyon. Some of the US members of Congress did not know that the US was favoring Vietnam and Malaysia. That's why when President Obama went to Japan, at tinanong siya in the dispute of the islands between
diba?
China and Japan, if China tries to access that
Pakinggan nyo. Tangina, ganun tayo tinatangan ng US.
was favoring Vietnam and Malaysia. That's why when President Obama went to Japan, at military, especially if they're not in the Navy, kita nyo, yung iba sa atin dito hanggang ngayon nagugulat. When I briefed the military, some in the military, especially if they're not in the Navy, hindi nila alam na ganito din ang sitwasyon. Some of the US members of Congress did not know that the US was favoring Vietnam and Malaysia. That's why when President Obama went to Japan,
US favoring Vietnam and Malaysia.
at tinanong siya in the dispute of the islands between China and Japan, if China tries to access that island, will it automatically trigger Section 5, which is the Mutual Defense Treaty? Sabi ni Obama, yes. Then he went to the Philippines, tinanong siya, kung may problema dito sa South China Sea at itong mga exclusive economic zone natin and everything, no? Will it trigger Section 5 of our Mutual Defense Treaty? Ang sagot ni Obama, no. So may I correct, just for the record, Senator Hontiveros, US is not a signatory to UNCLOS. They congratulate us on the award, but it is not their national policy to implement the award.
That is
I
exactly
must-
what I said, Mr. President.
Yes. So,
Like
China,
the US, China is not a member of the
no,
UNCLOS.
China is a member of UNCLOS.
Pero di tulad ng
Ito mo,
China, kahit
sinungaling
hindi member
talaga.
ng UNCLOS ang US, hindi
Sinungaling.
kilala niya yung
No, no.
arbitral award natin.
That's not correct, Mr. President.
Sinungaling!
China is a member of UNCLOS. Ang Amerika hindi member ng UNCLOS.
Yun na nga
Ang
po sinabi ko,
Amerika-
Mr. President.
Sinungaling ka siya, Risa.
Pero hindi niya policy na i-implement yung decision.
Actually,
we
Mr.
talk
President,
Oh,
directly
ito,
with the
mapipilit
US
niya yung
and
gusto
told the
niya.
US, give us a contractor, a service contractor, we will build for oil, send us a ship na bantayan. Ang sagot nila, hindi yan sa policy namin. But
Mr.
we want, may I finish my
Ang
sentence?
ina,
So,
pagka nababara ng
The
putang
good senator
ina.
was saying, freedom of navigation sa lahat. Ang number one na may interest sa freedom of navigation, magugulat man tayo, is China. Bakit po? Because 80% ng ekonomiya ng China ay nasa coastal areas niya and mostly malapit sa atin yung southern, di ba? So actually, yung sinasabi ng US na freedom of navigation, yun din ang gusto ng China. Ang unang magsasuffer kung may gera around the South China Sea is China.
Oh,
Ang pangalawang magsasuffer tayo kasi maiipit tayo sa gitna eh. Ang Malaysia at Vietnam ay meron pong strategy na nakikipag-away sila sa China sa territory nila pero hindi po sila gumigitna sa dalawang superpower na US at saka China.
Naman natin siguro dyan na Senator Cayetano is magandang ipag-usap kung yung kausap mo ay matino. Sa totoo lang. Ang problema, kausap ni President Marcos, first state visit niya ay China. Nakausap niya po si President Xi And during that meeting, they were very cordial, very friendly, and nagsabi po nila, they will continue to engage on freedom of navigation and movement within the West Philippine Sea. Wala pang ilang linggo na dumaan, ayun na po yung pag-take over na po ng green light.
Baka ang hindi matino, nasa part natin. Di ba? Hindi natin alam,
Or mga
Green lace.
harassment ng ating mga white ships po ito Coast Guard and our fisher folk. As a matter of fact, since then, the President has called the ambassador several times to Malacanang. If you ask me, I would have been more harsh actually. So, mahirap ang kumausap sa isang bansa na hindi mo naman matino. You started with your speech by saying that it was a phrase from the Bible. Fortunately, our friends in China do not believe in God, nor do we believe in the Bible. Because I remember talking to one and I said, "Are you Buddhist?" Sabi niya, "No, I'm communist." So wala silang pinapaniwala na Diyos. So tayo, naniniwala po tayo sa Diyos, takot po tayo kay Allah, to God. Mahirap po usapin yung isang bansa na hindi po takot sa kay Allah o kay God kasi wala po lang
Mr. President.
pinapaniwala.
Mr. President.
I will just end by saying,
Ano na, ang layo mo na, Mig.
if there were goodwill measures being done by that particular country to our discussions and negotiations, wala po sana tayong problema. Unfortunately, even in our embassy here, nangyari na sa akin yan. Ako hindi naman nabudol, pero I was thrown under the bus when he told me something about Pogo and I shared it to everybody. Ang sabi niya, kasinungalingan, ay pala, totoo pa lang sinabi niya and I can prove it with the witnesses that were with me there. Then a month after, about the incident of the Navy boat, yung kinuha nila yung debris from the Chinese rocket that fell, sabi nila it was a mutual understanding where they gladly gave us the debris to take back to China. And lumabas yung video, sinisigawan, ubusan nga ng English yung ating Navy frogman.
Well, Mr.
Galit na
President,
galit siya. Ang ginagawa nyo, what are you doing? Tapos, we have it here. It was shown in video here. So these are the things that does not happen with Vietnam, nor does it happen with Malaysia, because we have a mutual respect for one another.
Mr. President, that is
So,
my point
President,
precisely.
My
Mr.
point is,
Pres-
it's very hard to talk
no,
to
my
another
point
party.
precisely, Mr. President.
Mr. President.
Malaysia and Vietnam. Let me address the Senate President because he addressed my comments.
Well, I'm trying
So-
to address the good gentleman's many points that
Yeah,
are accumulating.
well, sorry,
President.
Senator Hontiveros, I was just also addressing your points. Actually, hindi pa tapos ipakita yung pictures ng Malaysia. No? But
Bang.
yung point ni Senate President, Sir Senate President, as I said, I share with you the outrage. I share with you the frustration, ba't nangyayari to, ba't kinausap ng Presidente. But I also see the historical past ng panahon ni President Duterte, layer after layer ng communication hanggang maayos to prevent. I don't know if this chamber was informed. There was even a time for almost 2 months, may get 1 month. Hindi nagsasagutan ng telepono ang ating Coast Guard at China. Pero during the Duterte administration, pinagbawal ng both sides na hindi sagutin ng both sides yung telepono ng Coast Guard. Kasi sabi nila, bawal na mag-away yung gray ship. Yung hindi pwede na yung Coast Guard na kung saan may emergency, hindi nag-uusap. So my point is, Mr. President, precisely why it's not happening between the Philippines and Malaysia at Vietnam, but it's also not happening between Vietnam and Malaysia and China is because they found a way to work it out without other superpowers. And may malinaw na usapan. Is Vietnam and Malaysia satisfied? Of course not. Because they believe it's theirs. Are we satisfied? No also. But I'm saying, Mr. President, in our desire
Ibig sabihin kasi sa atin, nakikialam yung Amerika. Kaya ginaganon din tayo ng China. So, ibig sabihin, kung merong hindi mahusay kausap dito, pwedeng yung leader natin. Di ba? Pwede, Parang yun yung nakikita kong gustong sabihin ni Cayetano. Kasi, itong, ang linaw-linaw, itong Malaysia, tsaka itong Vietnam, bakit hindi sila binubuli ng parang pambubuli sa atin? Kasi si Malaysia at tsaka si Vietnam, hindi naman nakikialam sa pinapakialaman ng ibang bansa tulad natin, di ba?
to do something, we have to ask first, tama po ba nasa UNGA? Secondly, in our desire to do something against the biggest one, dahil mas malaki ekonomiya, mas marami sila, mas malakas ang kanilang navy, do we ignore our problems naman with Vietnam and Malaysia? And lastly, Mr. President, yes, mali kung nagsabi ang China na hiningi nila. But again, I mentioned this to the majority leader. Under international law, kung meron kang something in space at mahulog, hindi pwede kunin ng ibang country yon. The only thing you can do is inform that country at sila kukuha. So kung may nahulog galing sa satellite ng China sa Pilipinas, ang obligasyon ng Pilipinas, tawagan ng China at kunin. Hindi rin pwede makipag-agawan ang tao natin. Baliktarin man natin ang sitwasyon. Sinabi ni Pangulong Marcos, may 2 tayong bagong satellite. Pag yan po nahulog, let's say in between the waters of Hong Kong and mainland, we cannot get it. The Chinese cannot get it. They're obligated to tell us. Ngayon, kung may miscommunication or they lied to us, mali, I do not excuse that. No? I was a very tough negotiator. Grabe po ang mga sinabi ko behind closed doors because yun po ang instruction ni President Duterte. Remember, a diplomat cannot say anything of his personal opinion. Only that of the instructions of the chief diplomat. So that's what my point here today, Mr. President. The chief diplomat has not stated that he wants this taken up sa UN. And yes, we're not a rubber stamp. And yes, may sariling pag-iisip ng Senate. Pero ang konstitusyon mismo nagsasabi na dapat ang presidente ang may diskarte at jurisprudence ay nagpapatunay nun. Sabi po dito, Pimentel versus Executive Secretary. GR 158088, July 6, 2005. In our system of government, the president, being the head of state, is regarded as the sole organ and authority in external relation and is the country's sole representative with foreign nations. This would put the Senate and executive in an awkward position and could cause embarrassment in the Senate if the president orders the DFA not to file the resolution. On the other hand, if it is going to file the resolution, why not hear this in committee, get the input of the National Task Force, get the input of 24 senators, and strengthen it? There's another question of, is it the General Assembly or is it the Security Council? Because in cases where peace is at stake, the Security Council has the authority. Or is it a case of implementation? So should we go back to the permanent court of arbitration? So that's my point, Mr. President. Even I'm not saying malito, but I'm not also saying tama. Bakit? Hindi ko po naririnig kung anong instructions ng presidente sa DFA. Hindi ko pa po naririnig ang ambassador natin sa US. Ano yung sinasabi niyang bagong guarantee ni President Biden? Yan po ba ay guarantee sa freedom of navigation lang or pwede na tayo mag-dig for oil? Pwede na tayo mag-drill? So this is such a complex, but I would agree with you, Mr. President. I see your passion. I talk to you in the back in your office and you are just, full of frustration na ang linaw naman na sa atin to. But as I'm saying, Mr. President, Malaysia has its frustrations, Vietnam has its frustrations, even China sometimes has its frustrations with other countries, with world powers, and even with dealing with us. For example, Mr. President, meron tayong meron tayong agreement, walang magtatayo. There was a time that some of our fishermen, with some of our personnel, tried to put nipa hats, sabi pahingahan lang daw. So syempre, nag-react yung China. And magalit man yung iba, tama sila mag-react. Bakit? Pumirma po si Blas Ople dun sa ASEAN sa agreement na pagbakante yung mga island, mga features, wala muna magtatayo ng kahit ano. And President Duterte asked me, Allan, ba't tayo hindi pwede magtayo ng kubo? Para lang naman shelter ng fishermen yon. Sir President, I will give you 2 reasons bakit hindi pwede. Number 1, yung declaration of conduct. Number 2, yun ang ginawa ng Chinese Sabi nila kubo lang, then ngayon punong-puno na. So alam na nila yung style na yon, kaya worry sila pag yung iba. So do I condemn them for doing that? Yes. Dapat yan wala. Dapat walang nakatayo sa mga island na yan. Tayo lang po, sa lahat ng claimant, tayo lang po ang disente, so to speak. Bakit po? Basic lang ang binibigay natin sa ating mga militar na nandun. Hindi natin minimilitarize to the point na it becomes a threat to our neighbors. But as the pictures would show, the Malaysian pictures, the Vietnam, this is a threat to our national security. Meron akong submarines ang Vietnam at Malaysia. Pag ang China po ay nag-retreat at umalis dun sa mga islands na hawak po nila, malaki po ang problema natin. Bakit? Ngayon po yung consensus madali kasi malaki yung China. So madaling sabihin po, bully sila. Pero po ang Malaysia is smaller than us. So if we have a dispute with Malaysia, what will the US say? And will we be the bully or will Malaysia be the bully? Ganon din sa Vietnam. So, Mr. President,
yes.
the point I want to make, and I can wrap up or continue, is that I really appeal to the body. Let us fully take this up in the committee. Kung kailangan 2 linggo, araw-araw, lahat ng briefing, lahat ng, kung kailangan in your chamber, kausapin din natin yung Chinese ambassador if we have to get think tanks from Southeast Asia. Because it's just so important. And I guarantee you, if we simply pass this resolution, tapon lang natin sa UNGA, madi-disappoint tayo. Because history has proven what I'm saying, na the UNGA is for consensus. It is not for highly contentious issues like this.
Mr.
It may work,
President,
it may not work,
gentlemen.
but
Ito
just my
na
last point,
naman.
Sir, my last point is, it's so important that if we don't get all the information, study it well, and maybe help the DFA craft the resolution itself, kung yun ang decision natin, baka maging negative pa sa atin to later on. So let me stop there and thank you for your patience, Senator Hontiveros and Senate President.
Thank you, gentlemen, Mr. President. Sa dami ng mga importanteng punto, malamang may mga nalimutan na ako, but allow me to begin with 2 of the important last
Susulat
questions
mo lang,
raised by the
malilimutan mo
gentleman
ba?
from Taguigan Pateros. Tama ba pumunta sa UNGA? Ang UNGA ba o ang UN mismo ay para sa consensus building and not for conflict resolution or not for upholding yung katamaan ng posisyon ng isang bansa na nanalo na ng kaso? Actually, if we examine history, Mr. President, tama din na i-consider nating pumunta sa UNGA. For example, Mr. President, the Nicaraguan government went to the UN General Assembly to enforce the International Court of Justice or ICJ decision
Ano ba
against
nangyari
the
dyan?
US. So Nicaragua, isang maliit na bansa din tulad natin, ang katapat niya sa pinagdesisyonan ng isang International Court, ICJ in that case, ay isang dambuhalang bansa rin, ang US noon, tulad natin ngayon sa China. They won in the ICJ, ayaw sumunod ng US to cease and desist in its activities around and inside Nicaragua, kaya dumulog ang Nicaragua sa isang katulad na resolution sa UNGA and they were upheld by the United Nations General Assembly. So, hindi mutually exclusive itong iba't ibang ginagawa ng gobyerno natin noon at maaring gawin ngayon. Pangalawa, do we ignore the problems with other countries? No. In fact, earlier I said that the good gentleman could also request the DFA to file a case before the PCA vis-a-vis our relations with Vietnam. Hindi po mutually exclusive itong ating resolution ngayon at ang ganyang posibleng course of action. Sinabing walang nawalang teritoryo nung nakaraang mga taon. That is arguable and I could research about that and get back to our dear colleagues on that. But yung isang malinaw na nangyari nung nakaraang mga taon which exacerbated the problem for us vis-a-vis China ay dinredge ng China yung ating seabed at ginamit yung ating sariling marine natural resources
Ano mga
para maghihak
Trillanes?
ng mga artificial na isla, imilitarize yung mga iyon at i-claim na kanila. Hindi policy ng US na i-enforce. Actually, hindi naman policy, hindi naman ibang mga bansa to enforce a favorable ruling that a country like us has been awarded in a forum like the PCA. It is up to us to continue taking the executive and legislative actions to stake our claim on the ground or in the water. And certainly, yung pagdulog natin sa UN General Assembly, as the Senate may approve it, expressing the sense of the Senate, and as the DFA would be the one to finalize the final language para makalikha ng mas malawak na consensus with other nations in the UNGA, Mr. President, I think is a very reasonable course of action based on principle at based sa nakaraang.
Alam nyo nakakalungkot, di ba? Merong mga senador na meron pang sariling interest talaga no? Doon mo makikita, kitang-kita mo at ramdam mo na pansariling interest. Yung mga pinaglalaban nila, di ba? Alam mo kung grandstanding, alam mo kung may laman, alam mo kung wala, di ba? Dito sa pinakita ni Allan, Senator Peter Cayetano, di ba? Makikita mo naman natin. At ngayon lang natin nakita, ngayon lang natin nalaman na gano'n na pala yung Vietnam tsaka yung Malaysia. Daig pa tayo, putang ina, kawawang-kawawa yun sa atin, bulok na barko. 'Di ba? Pinapaalis pa. 'Di ba? Tumitindi yung tensyon, bakit? Sabi ko sa inyo, dati pa rin. Hindi naman dahil sa ano yan dahil sa binubuli tayo ng China, hindi. Dahil yan sa mga nakikialam sa atin, sa bansa natin. Kasi, once na nakipag-alyado ka sa mga superpower, magiging threat din sa China yan. Pero ang malupit, di ba? Tayo yung nagkakaroon ng issue sa China kasi itong Malaysia at saka si Vietnam, hindi naman pinapakailaman na Amerika. Kagaya ng ginagawa sa atin ng ibang mga bansa. Gaya ng Amerika uli. 'Di ba? So, kaya nakakalungkot. Tapos, etong mga ganitong mga, ang tawag dito, mga resolution nila, ni Risa Hontiveros, nako, Diyos ko. Mas lalo lang magpapahamak sa atin. 'Di ba? Hindi sila nakikinig mas gusto nilang barayin si Cayetano. Putang ina, galing sa DFA yan. Nakita na niya yung pasikot-sikot. Kayo ba, ano ba nakita nyo? Siya alam niya yung mga nangyari. Siya nakita niya yan. Kayo ba pinakita nyo yan? Hindi 'Di ba? So mga kalapit na mga kababayan, nakakalungkot. Kayo nang bahala dito sa mga ganitong tao. 'Di ba? Nakakainis. At least nakita natin kung ano na yung nangyayari. Na merong bansa na mas maliliit sa atin, pero nakapagtayo sila ng mga sarili nilang mga base militar sa exclusive economic zone natin na tinatawag. 'Di ba? Pero claimant din sila doon. Pero mas matindi yung yung Malaysia ba yan? O Malaysia 11 yung naitayo. Na ano ba natin 'yon? Nabalitaan ba natin 'yon? Hindi. Puro China, puro China. Puro China, puro China. 'Di ba? Wala kasi pinag-iinitan nila 'yun para magmukhang si Duterte. Magmukhang China, China pet. Ganun lang kasimple 'yun. Wala 'to mga 'to, Diyos ko. Mga kalapit kayo nang bahala humusga diyan. Comment down below and maraming salamat po. Subscribe kayo dito tsaka hit the notification bell. Maraming salamat and magandang gabi. And stop recording.